every major country is in stagflate and lie mode now until the global economy collapses again or a major global financial system reset. So there's just more countless examples of this. President Trump was caught lying about the real economy again. It's gotten even worse. Besides, his constant PR things about the China trade deal coming, the South China Morning Post, which I think is a CCP-sponsored media outlet in China, they said that no trade deal until at least June of this year. But people online were joking that it could be a lot later than that. That would be the absolute earliest from what it sounds like. But earlier this week, about 6 days ago, the Atlanta Fed released numbers, and the Atlanta Fed slashes GDP growth prediction to near zero. So let me read quickly a couple articles. This one's from the Newsmax Wire. U.S. economy will barely grow in the first quarter based on data on domestic construction spending in December released on Monday. The Atlanta Federal Reserve's GDP Now forecast model showed. So I believe the construction spending is down 6%. The GDP Now model estimate for real GDP, seasonally adjusted annual rate, seasonal adjustment, as you guys know, is bullshit too, in the first quarter of 2019 is 0.2% on March 11th, down from 0.5% on March 8th. So they are getting worried. They cut it even more. After Monday morning's retail sales report from the U.S. Census Bureau, the nowcast of first quarter real personal consumption expenditures growth declined from 1.5% to 1%. Okay, meanwhile, Barclays economists on Monday revised lower their projection on U.S. economic growth in the first quarter to 2% from a prior estimate of 2.5%. So the January, this is a quote here, the January retail sales report was a touch better than expectations, end quote. However, further downward revisions to December's data came as a surprise to us, and he point to a slower momentum in consumption spending heading into Q1. This is probably because of the total credit card debt explosion in the last 5 or 6 months. Okay, so there's more information to this article. There's also the Zero Edge article. I'll attach this if you want to talk to it. But my overhead theme for this live stream show is that all the major countries, whether it's the United States, Japan, the European Union, China, are all in stagflate and lie mode. Okay? You won't hear this anywhere else. I coined the phrase. Everyone was saying inflate or die and all these other things. No, the correct version is stagflate and lie, because all these governments are misallocating hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars per year in capital. There is enormous malinvestment. And I wish things were not the case. I wish bankers went to jail. I wish there was real deflation that would benefit Main Street, so we would get more for less and not less for more. I wish my bills were not going up every year for healthcare and food and rent and all these other things, but this is not reality, okay? So if you want unicorns and rainbows, if you want to be told happy thoughts, if you want to take the blue pill, should probably go to another channel, okay? I want to tell you guys the truth, because once we have the truth, it's powerful. Yes, it's not good news, but if we know the truth, we can prepare, we can adapt, we can maybe influence a small amount of people around us. I used to have a large platform. I used to get over 7,000 views per video on this. Now I get barely 1,000. So I don't have a large platform. One of my podcast listeners was harassing me about not setting up a petition, calling me lazy. Well, I used to have that many thousands of views per video, and I used to have a large platform to influence people. Okay? But I'm done whining. I just want to tell you guys, though, that the best analogy I can talk about these governments is that they are a runaway train built on government spending and debt. Okay? They are not doing the right thing, any of these governments, because they are worried about the pitchforks, the politicians and bureaucrats who are making pretty good salaries, some of them exorbitant salaries, and other perks, either like inside information on stocks or key seats to board of directors later with this corruption, that they are not thinking about the long term. They're only they only care about lining their pockets in the short term. So the United States, Japan, the European Union, China, these countries are runaway trains with government spending and debt. And the brakes are gone. Okay, the brakes on the train are gone. And in the case of the United States and China, the trains are speeding up. Okay? So maybe if the train was slowing down on its own on momentum or something, where the government spending was being cut and governments were trying to do the right thing, where there was massive cuts in government spending, there might be a better outcome. But this is not the case. Trump went when the U.S.'s debt to GDP was already super high. He did those corporate tax cuts, and I'm in favor of tax cuts, but there was no corresponding cuts in government spending. So he accelerated the speed of the train going down the tracks without brakes. Do you understand the analogy? So the U.S. is China, the U.S., all these countries are pretty much in the same boat. They're in stagflate and lie mode. And this is why Trump is talking about how good the economy is when we get this data from the Atlanta Federal Reserve that's saying otherwise. So expect the asset markets, because these governments care about tax revenues and other things, expect the asset markets to continue to be more and more divorced from reality, from the real economic data. And yet we have people on Wall Street, and their salaries depend on this, and this is why so many of them lie. Or don't know. Either some of them don't know, blissfully ignorant, they're getting paid high salaries, they don't pay attention to the right data, or they're just outright lying. There was a good interview on QTR podcast with one of the guys from Fast Money. I forgot which one it is. It's Guy Adami. And Guy Adami actually said, yeah, the Federal Reserve's horrible. They're going to be the biggest, Ben Bernanke and the Federal Reserve are going to be the biggest villains when this whole thing ends. But he said that we cannot talk about this on CNBC because our audience doesn't want to hear it. Okay, so we had a number of listener questions, and I'm discussing this with people in the comment section, and this is important too. So I'll just address this rather than in the comment section. I'll just address this right now. So people are asking for solutions to this problem with government spending and corruption. And I could tell you that at the federal level in the United States, there is no solution to this. The system is going to run its course. I'm sorry to say this. I wish this wasn't true. But I have spoken off the record 6 or 7 years ago to a bank lobbyist. Okay, this guy was making big money. He was from a banking family. And he straight up told me that fiat money, the currency is bad, and the banks don't want to make any changes to the system. It's too profitable for them. And until the fiat money system is gone and the world reserve currency is away from the U.S. and all these other things are fixed, the system is going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And you know what? It's like this in these other countries as well. So, yes, it sounds like bad news, but you know what? You have some time to prepare. The system did not collapse yet, okay? Yes, we're going to have more inflation and stagflation. Yes, our taxes are going to be layered and going up across the board, but you have some time to adapt to all this, okay? It's not all bad news if you prepare and adapt to how the system is changing and or collapsing. It's like a slow motion collapse. A lot of people are going to be surprised years from now when their bills double. If their bills haven't already doubled. My bills have already doubled since I graduated college 13 years ago. But other people who aren't paying attention are probably going to blame capitalism. And yet they're being taxed across the board. Their car taxes are going up. They're paying more sales tax on everything they buy at the store or the restaurant or whatever. And, all these things are going to be going up across the board. The number one thing that these states and local governments like doing is the property tax. And then just totally taxing tourists. I think California is just absolutely destroying taxes on tourists. And people still want to go there. So what we can do, the solution, there will be no solutions, real solutions, in quotes, out of the federal government level because there is corporations, there is bureaucrats, there is special interest groups, including 3 governments that control both political parties, that have enormous lobbying dollars. That's China, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. We should get them the hell out of politics. They have immense control over key politicians in both parties. The military-industrial complex, Wall Street, they do not want any change really in the system. They benefit from Congress being broken and becoming more broken and not getting really anything done. They benefit from what the system is now and the unsustainable path the system is on. And I've spoken off the record to people running businesses here in the DC metro area who have Pentagon contracts, and they told me it might just be lip service, but they said, they realize there is a debt problem in this country, but they don't want their contract reduced, so they're not willing to bite the bullet. You hear the same thing from federal government bureaucrats if they're aware of the debt problem, that is. Some of them are. So if you hear that, they're like, well, we do have an enormous debt problem, and there should be cutbacks in the federal government budget for the Pentagon and other places, but I don't want my salary cut. I don't want my budget cut at my place. So this is the problem. You have a bunch of special interest groups and lobbyists and bureaucrats who are just raping and pillaging the system, and they're going to force the system to, they're not going to let the train slow down, to stick with the same analogy. The brakes are already off the train. Okay? The brakes are, and this is Japan, this is China, this is all these countries. So, and in fact, you know, in China and the US, the train is speeding up. But the solutions, people want solutions. Okay, what you can do is you can hopefully influence one or two people around you, friends and family members, and you can start preparing for the next system or protecting yourself against your standard of living being totally destroyed through currency devaluation or inflation and taxes. And the best way to do this is you are going to have to be entrepreneurial. Okay, if your standard, if the government is if you're an employee and you have a paycheck and the government, the federal government with all the taxes, the state government, the local government are all taking either new taxes or raising taxes out of your paycheck, and your standard of living is falling, you are going to have to find new ways to replace that income. Okay, so that means if you don't already have additional skills besides your job, you're going to have to do side hustles. You're going to have painful talks with your family members or partners or loved ones or friends to maybe start a side business or something for additional income to replace the income that is being stolen, siphoned away through stagflation and taxes. Okay, so you can wake people up, you can tell people what is really happening in the system, and then you can adapt to it. And that means it sucks that you're gonna have to maybe have an additional 1 or 2 part-time jobs or a side hustle, maybe start a side business or find an additional online income in addition to your full-time job. But this is the new normal. And let me give you a very stern warning about this, that I'm hearing a lot of people still think socialism is the answer. So in the short term, economically, it might make some people's lives better with socialism, but if you've studied history, you see what's going on in Venezuela and many of these other countries that went to very hardcore socialism, even if the elections of these socialist politicians were peaceful, and the more socialist politicians that get elected into Congress, into U.S. presidency, the more and more likely that what is left of free speech will be totally eliminated at some point. Which means that people like Greg Hunter of USA Watchdog, myself, many others, will be risking going to jail providing you guys with information like this. We will either be, so we're already being censored now and demonetized, but we are not being threatened with jail just for criticizing any of these governments or trying to give you guys a different opinion for people who have independent thought and are contrarian. Okay? So we are on a very dangerous path. Very, very dangerous. And people are like, oh, Jason, Europe has better socialism than those other countries you talked about, like Mao's China and Venezuela and others. Well, in the United Kingdom, now if you post a social media post on Twitter or Facebook that someone doesn't like, you could be charged with hate speech. You're risking an enormous fine and jail time. And look at the stuff that Count Dankula had to go through. So that, and that's only going to get worse in the United Kingdom and the European Union. It's not going to get better there, okay? For people who are proponents of free speech and independent thinkers, they are not going to get their rights back anytime soon. It's only going to get worse there. And that is coming, best case scenario, to the U.S. So if you vote for socialism, at some point as more and more socialist politicians get elected, they will not want to hear anyone criticizing them. They will not want to hear anyone who has a differing opinion. It will be outlawed and banned. Okay? It is sad. And people are like, oh, Venezuela wasn't real socialism, but most people aren't aware of this, but Hugo Chavez and Maduro the dissenting populist politicians there who are speaking out against them, the mainstream media did not cover this because they liked what Hugo Chavez was doing. A lot of politicians and people who spoke out against Hugo Chavez and Maduro and the corrupt government in Venezuela, they were murdered, okay? They were thrown in jail. They had a black bag put over their heads, and they were taken by the Venezuelan secret police in the middle of the night, and they were imprisoned without even being charged, no trial, no nothing, okay? A lot of people in Venezuela. And it's happened in other places. So I'm not saying that this is going to happen immediately in the U.S., but the more and more socialist politicians come, the less likely they will want to hear anyone criticizing them, or anyone criticizing the government, or anyone saying that the government is wasting money on this program. You want an American example of this? One of my heroes, Henry Hazlitt, one of the most brilliant economic writers of his time. He was writing at I believe the New York Times. He was their book editor. And he was criticizing FDR and the New Deal for the debt and a waste of money. And guess what? That asshole FDR got him fired. Okay? He got blacklisted for a while. He could not get a job for a while. And to a certain extent, we already have that coming to the United States. But it's going to get worse. But there are solutions to this at the local level. Stuff that you can do, your friends, and your family can do, but there will be no solutions at the federal level. I can tell you the DC bubble here, and I speak to a lot of people off the record who are in the middle levels and high up sometimes, they don't really want change. They will occasionally pay lip service to the debt, but they have no solution to any of the major problems in the country. They basically want cuts from everywhere else. But the U.S.'s budget, a lot of the U.S. government's federal government budget spending is already baked in. You have an enormous amount of military spending that Trump just got an increase in, okay? Good luck trying to cut that. Okay, Obama was only able, I think, to get a tiny little cut, and there were enormous exposés from the neocons or Republicans about, now the U.S. is China and Russia are gonna invade and all this, crazy stuff from the neocons like Billy Crystal and others. And you have an enormous amount of federal government agency spending already baked in, and you have interest payments on the debt, which are only going to go higher, probably. Even if interest rates are manipulated back down, the debt will grow. So the interest payments on the debt are not going to get smaller because the debt's getting bigger. The national debt's getting bigger. And on top of this, you have all the unfunded liabilities. And eventually there's going to be very difficult conversations with a lot of older Americans who paid into the system thinking that they would get some type of Social Security check and others. And we're vastly approaching, I'm actually surprised this has not happened already, means testing. Okay? Means testing, if you're not familiar with what that is, if you're making a high enough salary, they will say, despite you paying into the system for decades with your paycheck for Social Security tax and other stuff, Social Security insurance, it's really tax, and or Ponzi scheme, and other things that have been taken out of your paycheck, they will say that, oh, you make too much money now, and for national security, you're not getting any money. So any of the money you put in for decades that you were supposed to get some of it back, you're not getting any. So at some point this will happen. I'm surprised it has not happened already. Okay, sorry, I'll get off my soapbox here. But we had a number of listeners talking about, Jason, you don't offer any solutions. And I'm telling you that here in the DC metro area, with the lobbyists, with the federal government bureaucrats, with the special interest groups that lobby, with Wall Street, with the military industrial complex, they do not want any major cuts. They benefit off this corruption and the problems. So the system's going to have to run its course. This is back to my conversation off the record, because I didn't use his name or anything, with a bank lobbyist. And he basically said the system is going to have to run its full course. The train is going to have to either go off the tracks or run out of gas. Probably go off the tracks. But you have time. So if you... sticking with the train analogy, sorry, this is kind of on the fly because I was thinking about this before I started recording with the train analogy. So is it better then, sticking with the train analogy, to... if you know the train is in trouble, to not tell the passengers that you're maybe going to crash soon? Or is it best to tell the passengers that you're probably going to crash, and then some of the people on the train will actually survive the crash? So that's the question. So is it better to lie to the people on the train, if you know the train is going to crash, that the train is fine, even though the train is speeding up and there's no brakes? I think personally it is better to tell the people on the train and to organize a plan and get people prepared so some of the people actually survive the train crash, the train wreck. That's just me. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you want unicorns and rainbows. Okay, let me take a look at listener questions and comments. So know the mess at the federal level. The mess cannot be fixed because there are a bunch of groups. Wall Street, military, industrial complex. There are a bunch of other countries that don't that spend money lobbying dollars for the U.S. that do not want things changed. And the bureaucracy here does not want their budgets cut. They don't want their salaries cut. They don't want major change. So, sticking with the stagflate and lie theme, we have the Chinese stock market, which is surprisingly, despite the really bad real-world economic data we're getting from China, and I'm sure it's still underestimated, but it's really, really bad, the Chinese stock market in 2019 so far has already rallied. At one point, it was up 25%, a rally in the Chinese stock market. I think it's sold off a little bit. The rally's down to around 20%. So we're at a RMB to dollar exchange rate at 6.716. It's not even at 7 yet. Hedge fund manager Kyle Bass has been betting on a big Chinese RMB devaluation. So there's an article from Reuters about the Chinese stock market rally, and I think a lot of it's probably propaganda. It's from March 15th. I'll read it really quick. Hardened by signs of an end to a long-running trade war with the United States and monetary easing at home, China's stock indices have vaulted by a fifth since the beginning of this year and recovered a big chunk of 2018's losses. The Shanghai Stock Index scaled the 3,000 mark for the first time since June this month. The rally has been characterized by heavy retail participation, rising foreign flows into the country, and soaring turnover. Okay, here are some of the salient features of this rally. China has outperformed its Asian peers and most other global stock markets this year. Okay, Beijing's efforts to support an economy growing at its slowest pace in 20 years through tax cuts and government spending are widely seen as a critical factor behind the recent run-up. So, my opinion on the Chinese stock market rally, I think it's a combination of factors. I think there are a lot of Chinese people who are guessing that these RMB devaluation probably will occur in the near future, and they're kind of trying to, as insurance or a hedge, park some money in the stock market in case there is a devaluation. And in the long term, stocks are not, especially if there's really bad inflation or currency devaluation, stocks are not a good place to offset that type of inflation. But in the short term, it appears that Chinese are interested in doing that. There may also be market manipulation. The Chinese have learned from the US about the plunge protection team and other market manipulation. And so even though, like I said, the currency has not devalued yet past the 7 exchange rate, which is what hedge fund manager Kyle Bass and other China bears are betting on, that doesn't mean it won't happen in the next 6 to 12 months. So that would be part of China's stagflate and lie. And we know that inflation is a lot higher in China for food and rent than they're saying. So I spent a ton of time talking about the train analogy. Bottom line, though, is you can still save yourself. You can save your friends and family if they are willing to listen to some of the stuff you're willing to say and adapt. Okay? If they're just going to be an employee and they're just going to sit at their desk all day and complain that more taxes are being taken out of their paycheck and the politicians are changing the rules and that their standard of living is being destroyed, and then they go vote for socialism, then, in the short term, socialism may help them a little bit. In the long term, it's going to make things even worse. It's not a panacea. It's going to make things even worse. And eventually, it's going to take away even more of their rights and destroy their standard of living even further. So hopefully some of you guys will like what I have to say and will start having conversations with their friends and family about this. And trust me, these conversations are not easy. My parents think I'm nuts. So this video is actually one video before my 1000th video. So I've done 1,000 of these videos. So my listener who's saying I'm lazy, I don't know anyone who's read over 500 books and then, well, maybe Stefan Molyneux, who's read over 500 books and then also put out 1,000 YouTube videos. For free too. I did a funny little poll about Donald Trump, funny nicknames for all of his stock market manipulation about last month. And Christopher Irons at QTR, Quotha Raven, was kind enough to put it on his Twitter, and I got 1,100 votes. And the winner with around 40% of the vote, and this was a surprise, was not the Trump and dump, the pump and Trump. It was Donald Pump. So that was kind of a surprise to me. And the other major thing that is actually, this is mentioned in a very good interview with Jeff Gunlock by Grant Williams on Real Vision TV a week or two ago. And this talks about the growth in corporate debt. And in the last 12 years, the amount of corporate debt outstanding, guys, has doubled. That's nuts. And on top of this, Gunlock also estimates that the credit ratings agencies, because they're not downgrading the ratings for these corporations and letting them get away with ridiculous expectations so they could either do more share buybacks with debt or more like leverage buyouts and mergers and acquisitions with debt and false assumptions about revenue growth and cash flow growth and things like that, is that there's a 45% undervaluing, I think, in corporations that should be junk debt already, according to Gunlock. And he's considered one of the best experts in the country about bonds. So it's basically credit card debt and corporate debt and government spending that is keeping the fake GDP alive. Otherwise, there is no real economic growth. So President Trump is clearly lying about it. And the Atlanta Fed has revised downward that even further. So it's going to be stagflate and lie until the next global financial system or the reset. Even Jerome Powell, who is supposed to not be an academic, who is supposed to not rely on these Federal Reserve models, he's become wonky now, and he's citing these models, these stupid PhD Keynesian economic models. So Jerome Powell is nowhere near the Fed chairman, similar to Paul Volcker, that people like Grant Williams and Danielle DiMartino Booth and others thought he would be. Okay, let me check my notes. I think I covered just about everything in under 30 minutes. There's also a really good Dr. Mark Faber interview from Greg Hunter that was released in the last 24 hours. So I recommend watching that as well. And he's talking about the problems with rising socialism, rising wealth disparity, and MMT. And MMT, guys, would just accelerate currency problems. So the MMT people say that the U.S. can spend infinite amounts of its own currency, but it doesn't talk about how other countries may not accept the currency anymore, or they may start to change trade rules for that. So there's none of that. So imports would start to be super expensive at that point if the U.S. went down the MMT route and started really ramping up the amount of currency units. And the U.S. is already issuing currency units. So it's not like the U.S. isn't issuing it. So MMT would only, for the analogy, just add more gasoline to the fire that's already going. Pablo says, June, talk about the kicking the can down the road. I'm not even sure we'll get anything in June for the U.S. and China trade deal. If there is a trade deal, it would only be in name only. And Oh, I wanted to talk about this too, that I'm not saying it's right because I'm not in favor of tariffs, but I think what Trump will probably do in the next couple months is he will probably, remember he caved, and on March 1st he was not, on March 1st he was supposed to have raised the tariffs further, I think up to 25% or more on some goods, and he didn't do it. He gave the Chinese some reprieve. I think Trump will probably in the next couple months start jacking up the tariffs on Chinese goods further because he wants that deal done. Now, I'm not saying it's right. Like I said, I'm anti-tariff, but I think Trump will probably do it for leverage to accelerate a deal because it appears that the Chinese are not really in a hurry now to get a deal done, and Trump wants the deal done. But the Chinese are still going to cheat, okay? So even if there's a deal, it's not really a deal because there's really nothing to stop the Chinese from stealing research and development and intellectual property. They've been making hundreds of billions of dollars a year in extra value for their economy doing it. There's estimates out there. There's a number of research reports out there. Kyle Bass talks about this as well. There's federal government agency reports and private sector reports from cybersecurity agencies estimating that the Chinese steal hundreds of billions of dollars per year in research and development and intellectual property from corporations outside of China. Prasanthi girl, nice to see you here too. Justin, thank you for giving me the kind words. I'm glad you like the show. So there is no solution at the federal level, okay? Both the Republicans, the neocons here, they don't want the government Pentagon spending cuts, okay? They don't want it because a lot of them are bought and paid for. Even guys like these, what's his name, Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro's always wrong on his predictions. How the hell is he so popular when he's always wrong? I think that guy is like very highly paid, controlled opposition by like the military industrial complex, the Pentagon, because he's basically neocon and in Israel. I mean, if you were in the prediction business and Ben Shapiro, he's a smart guy, but all of his predictions are wrong. If you were in the prediction business and you made a lot of predictions and you were always wrong, how would you have your business being grown? I mean, unless you're a brilliant marketer like Peter Schiff. Oh, thank you, Choices36, for the super chat donation. I appreciate it. Hello, Kirsten. I've actually listened to TSA agent employees that spoke off the record, former ones, and the areas where 5G has been tested in the United States at airports, 5G devices, that a lot of TSA agents have gotten very sick with cancer and other health problems, miscarriages, etc. So I think the globalists, like I said, a lot of these globalists and these politicians that are champagne socialists, they like China a lot, and this is another control mechanism. And I don't think the technology is being tested properly. The technology should be tested for years to deem that it is safe before it is released, and that is not the case. There's entire blog websites on a bunch of Ben Shapiro's bad predictions. Hey, if you want the truth, Peter Schiff is a smart guy. I've interviewed him. If you want the truth about Peter Schiff, go look up the Yelp reviews of Euro-Pacific Capital, okay? Go look up the Yelp reviews on Euro-Pacific Capital. I won't say any more. Okay, I'm looking at listener questions and comments now, and then I'm going to wrap up the show. I don't know if I really want to be here for an hour. I like you guys, but it's kind of late, and I need to go lift weights. I have a lot of stress, and I want to de-stress. I need to work out. Yeah, so, I mean, if we were really going to fix things at the federal government level, the federal government spending would have to be drastically cut. There would have to be a cut in military spending. There would have to be cuts in all the federal government agencies. There would have to be cuts in entitlements. There would have to be cuts in welfare and warfare. And you know what? None of this is happening. It's the exact opposite. I wish there was a solution to this. But you know what? The people in the DC bubble here, in the DC metro area, who make key decisions, they only pay the debt lip service. The Democrats are only talking about the debt now. They have no intention of fixing the debt other than raising taxes because they hate anyone making money. Which, by the way, when they do make money, they use LLCs and they hide the money offshore. They're hypocrites enormously. But they have the Democrats, sorry, I got a little off tangent. The Democrats are the worst hypocrites. But anyway, though, they have no intention. The Democrats are talking about the debt now because that is the hot button topic, but they have no intention of actually cutting government spending. The Republicans are borrow and spend, so running supply side economics and growing government spending, and the Democrats are tax and borrow and spend. The Democrats look for tons of new ways to tax, tons of new ways to borrow, tons of new ways to spend. Both political parties deserve enormous blame for this. And that's part of the problem, is this two-party system. It needs to go. But you know what? The corporations don't want it to go. And the corporations, Wall Street, there's rules on Wall Street, and Jay Taylor, who used to work on Wall Street as an investment banker, talked about this, and he was straight up told by his bosses when he was an investment banker that he could only vote Republican or Democrat. And I'm sure now probably if you vote Republican or... I spoke to a Wall Street guy who came down here for the Trump inauguration, spoke off the record, Trump inauguration and the deplorable, which I went to, and he basically said that if his bosses found out he was here, he was going to get fired. So it apparently, like a lot of Wall Street people now, can't even vote Republican, that you can get in trouble with that. And I know people that worked at large corporations like Pepsi and Taco Bell and others that were told if they put anything publicly on their social media during the 2016 election, prior to the 2016 election about Trump, that they would be fired. So there, to a certain extent, there is no free speech here, but my point is that these things can get worse. So if you're an independent thinker, if you disagree with the majority of people about an opinion on a policy or an issue or something like that, and you speak out, or you have a differing opinion, you're risking your job, or you're risking, if things get worse and more socialists gain power, you're risking going to prison for it. Okay, guys, well, there's a ton of other comments coming in here, and I honestly don't feel like answering them right now. Yes, tyranny is coming, Kirsten. Tyranny is coming. And the best we can do is save our friends and family and the people that are willing to listen. We can maybe wake a couple people up. I used to have a large platform, and now I do not. So, yes, we can save the people closest to us. We can come up with solutions at the local level for friends and family and maybe local government in our communities, but there is no solution coming at the federal level until there is a collapse or a global system reset. These are runaway trains in all these major governments, full stagflate and lie, full economic propaganda, and the system will have to run its course before there is any real change. And I would prefer no violence, no civil war with pitchforks and other things, and I would prefer free speech, and I would prefer no one to go to prison just for stating a differing opinion. But the path we are on is the path of the European Union, where stuff that is free speech that should be protected under the First Amendment here in the United States will be labeled hate speech, and you will be risking enormous fines and prison time in the near future. Okay, guys, well, that's it. I'm getting off my soapbox for tonight. Everyone have a great week, and I'm going to go do something that's not as depressing for now. Okay, bye.